Why did no one question the silence after the explosion? The night over Gary, Indiana felt wrong from the beginning. Not dangerous in the obvious way, no gunfire, no movement, no visible threat. Just wrong, like the city itself was holding its breath. Sloane Merritt noticed it the moment her boots touched the cracked pavement. She didn't say anything. She rarely did, because explaining how she knew things meant revealing things she had spent years burying. And silence was easier. The team moved ahead of her with practiced precision, 6 men shaped by repetition, discipline, and certainty. They trusted patterns, training each other. They did not trust her. Not really. To them, she was a civilian attachment, a contractor, a translator, a liability wrapped in borrowed gear 2 sizes too large. Sloane let them think that. It made things simpler. But her mind was already working. Counting angles, measuring shadows, tracking distance between cover points. The geometry of survival. She had learned that long before she ever learned to speak multiple languages or read intercepted transmissions. Back when her father would hand her a rifle one moment and make her stitch a wound the next. Both hands. Always both. The lesson never left her, even when she tried to forget. And tonight, forgetting wasn't working, because something in this place felt arranged. Not abandoned. Prepared. She noticed the pattern first in the streets. The collapsed structures weren't random. The sightlines weren't accidental. Someone had chosen this ground carefully. And that meant one thing. They were expected. Still, she said nothing, because she knew how this would go. Say too much too early, and they'd dismiss her. Say nothing and wait. So she waited. Until the explosion. It came without warning, an RPG tearing through the silence like a scream. The world vanished into pressure and sound. Sloane hit the wall hard enough to knock the air from her lungs, but her mind didn't scatter. It never did. Instead, it narrowed. Focused. Her body cataloged damage before pain could take over. Left shoulder shrapnel. Not arterial. Manageable. She pressed her hand to the wound with precise pressure, controlling the bleeding before her heartbeat could accelerate. Around her, chaos unfolded. Gunfire, shouting, movement. But Sloane wasn't watching the chaos. She was watching the pattern. 3 muzzle flashes left. 2 right. Elevated positions. Classic L-shaped ambush. Efficient. Predictable. Except there was something missing. Or rather, something too still. Her eyes shifted. Northwest. A building with broken windows, except one. One window that reflected nothing. No light. No distortion. Just absence. Her hand moved to the radio before anyone else noticed. Sniper, she said quietly. Red building, 3rd floor, 2nd window from the left. A pause followed. 3 seconds. Not doubt. Assessment. Then a rifle cracked once. The window exploded outward. The invisible threat gone. The fight continued for 90 seconds. Then silence returned. But it wasn't the same silence. Now it had weight. And suspicion. And something else. Awareness. They moved fast after that, dragging her into an abandoned warehouse. The team reformed, secured positions, checked sectors. And finally, someone turned their attention to her. The medic knelt beside her without hesitation. Need to see the shoulder. She nodded once. He cut through her gear quickly, exposing the wound. It was bad, but not fatal. He'd seen worse. What he hadn't seen was everything else. His light passed over her skin and stopped. Just for a fraction of a second. But in that second, everything changed. Because the wound on her shoulder wasn't the only mark. There were scars. Old ones. Precise ones. A surgical entry wound. A clean exit line across her back. Gunshot. Years old. Then her forearm. Faint but unmistakable. Blade deflection scars. Close combat. Trained. Highly trained. Not civilian. Not even close. His hands didn't stop working. But his mind did. Because the file he had read about Sloane Merritt didn't match the person sitting in front of him. Not even a little. Across the room, another man was watching. Briggs. He didn't miss details. He didn't miss pauses either. And that pause told him something was wrong. Or something was hidden. Sloane didn't look at them. She simply adjusted her breathing. Slowed her pulse. Controlled everything. Like she always did. Because control was the only thing that kept the past from bleeding into the present. But then, another problem. Garrett. His breathing shifted. Subtle, but not to her. She was already moving before the medic could react. 7 steps. That's all it took. She grabbed his arm. Garrett, when did you hit the wall? He blinked. Confused. Blast. Left side or right? Right, why? She was already counting his breaths. Tracking chest movement. Listening. Not with her ears. With everything. Tension pneumothorax, she said calmly. Right lung, we have minutes. The medic froze for half a heartbeat. Then moved. Fast. But not faster than her. Because she already knew. She always knew. The needle went in. Air escaped with a sharp hiss. Garrett's breathing returned. Color came back. Life stabilized. Silence followed again. But this time it was different. Because now they were looking at her. Not like before. Not dismissive. Not indifferent. Now there was something else. Recognition. Garrett studied her hands. My father used to say, he murmured, still catching his breath, you can tell a real medic by how they move. He swallowed. Those are field hands. Sloane said nothing. She just walked back to the wall. Sat down. And stared at nothing. But inside, something shifted. Because for 4 years, she had hidden who she was. What she had done. What she had survived. And now, that silence was starting to crack. Just slightly. Just enough to be dangerous. Because the truth doesn't stay buried forever. And neither does instinct. Not when the world starts demanding both hands again. And somewhere in the dark, beyond the warehouse walls, voices whispered through broken radio signals. Voices planning. Voices hunting. Voices waiting. Sloane closed her eyes. And listened. Because the real danger hadn't even begun yet. And she already knew something the others didn't. They weren't escaping. They were being guided. Slowly. Carefully. Toward something worse. And she hadn't told them yet. Not all of it. Not even close. Why did the radio signal sound familiar, like something she had heard years ago? The static came in waves. Soft at first. Almost harmless. But Sloane felt it before she fully heard it. A pattern buried inside noise. Her eyes opened slowly, fixing on the cracked ceiling above her. The warehouse was quiet now, too quiet for a place that had just survived an ambush. The team had settled into a defensive rhythm. Rotations, watch posts, controlled breathing. Normal. But the radio in the corner wasn't normal. It clicked again. A faint transmission tried to push through. Broken words. Fragments. But Sloane's pulse shifted. Not faster. Sharper. Because her mind wasn't hearing noise. It was recognizing structure. She stood without a word. No one stopped her this time. That was new. The radio operator glanced up as she approached, hesitant, then moved aside. Not out of fear, not even respect. Something in between. Uncertainty. Sloane knelt beside the equipment, adjusting the frequency dial with careful precision. Her fingers moved like they'd done this 1,000 times before. Because they had. The signal cleared just enough. A voice slipped through. Distorted. Foreign. But organized. Coordinates. Timing intervals. Call signs. Not random chatter. This was command-level communication. Sloane's jaw tightened. Because she understood it. Every word. But more than that. She recognized it. Not the language. The cadence. The structure of how information was being relayed. She had trained in it. Years ago. Before she disappeared. Before she chose silence. Her hand froze on the dial. You've heard this before, haven't you? Briggs' voice came from behind her. Calm. Measured. Watching. Sloane didn't turn. Repeat the last burst, she said quietly to the operator. He hesitated for half a second. Then complied. The voice returned. Phase 2 confirmed, corridor clear. Proceed with containment. Containment. Sloane closed her eyes briefly. There it was. The word that didn't belong. This wasn't a kill mission. This was something else. Something controlled. Something deliberate. She stood slowly. They're not just ambushing us, she said. The room shifted. Attention sharpened. What do you mean? Briggs asked. Now she turned. And for the first time, she didn't look like an outsider. They're hurting us. A pause. Confusion flickered across a few faces. Garrett frowned. Hurting us where? Sloane didn't answer immediately. Because this was the part she hated. The part where truth forced its way out. They've blocked our exit routes, she continued. Collapsed streets weren't random. The sniper wasn't positioned for maximum kill, he was positioned for pressure. Briggs stepped closer. You're saying that ambush was controlled? Yes. How do you know? There it was. The question. Not hostile, but direct. Sloane met his eyes. And for a moment, something unspoken passed between them. History. Instinct. Recognition of someone who understood more than they should. Because I've seen it before, she said. Not a lie. But not the full truth either. Briggs studied her. Longer this time. Then nodded once. All right, he said quietly. Then tell me where they're pushing us. Sloane turned toward the broken windows. Toward the dark city beyond. Her mind mapped everything. Routes. Angles. Intent. They want us moving northeast, she said finally. Why? She hesitated. Just for a second. Because saying it out loud made it real. Because that's where the trap is. Silence settled again. Heavy. Garrett shifted uncomfortably. We're already in a trap. Sloane shook her head slightly. No, she said, this was just the funnel. The word hung in the air. Funnel. Meaning the worst was still ahead. The medic glanced at Briggs. We should move before they tighten it. Briggs didn't answer immediately. He was still watching Sloane. Measuring her. Deciding something. Then, Gear up, he ordered. The team moved instantly, training taking over. But beneath the movement, something had changed. They weren't ignoring her anymore. They were listening, even if they didn't fully trust it yet. Sloane stepped back, checking her shoulder wound. It throbbed now, a deep, steady ache, but pain was background noise. Always had been. What mattered was timing, and they were running out of it. As the team prepared to move, Garrett approached her. Slower this time. More careful. You didn't hesitate, he said quietly. She didn't look at him. About what? Me, he replied, the lung. She shrugged faintly. It was obvious. He shook his head. No, he said, it was. A beat passed. Then, you've done that before. Not a question. A statement. Sloane finally glanced at him. And there it was again. That edge of truth pressing against the surface. Everyone's done something before, she said. Deflection. Clean. Simple. But Garrett didn't push. He just nodded. Because he understood something now. She wasn't just hiding skills. She was hiding a life. And lives like that didn't stay buried without a reason. They moved out minutes later. The city greeted them with the same unnatural stillness. But now it felt different. Now they knew it wasn't empty. It was watching. Sloane took rear position. Not assigned. Chosen. Because she trusted her instincts more than their formation. Her eyes scanned constantly. Windows. Rooftops. Shadows that didn't quite align. And then, she saw it. A flicker. 3 blocks back. Movement too precise to be random. She slowed slightly. Adjusted her path. No announcement. Just awareness. Because confirming it meant acknowledging it. And she wasn't ready to say it yet. Not until she was sure. They moved deeper. Northeast. Exactly where she said they would. The streets narrowed. The buildings closed in. The air felt tighter. Controlled. Designed. And then the radio clicked again. Louder this time. Clearer. Target group progressing as predicted. Sloane's chest tightened. Not fear. Recognition. Because that voice wasn't just familiar. It was personal. She stopped walking. Just for a second. But Briggs noticed. What is it? Sloane didn't answer immediately. Because her past had just stepped out of the shadows. And it had a voice. I know who that is, she said finally. The words landed hard. Briggs' expression didn't change. But his eyes sharpened. Who? Sloane swallowed once. A rare crack in her control. Then, someone who shouldn't be here. A pause. Then Garrett asked the question no one else wanted to. Friend or enemy? Sloane looked ahead. Into the narrowing corridor of broken streets. Into the trap she already understood too well. And her answer came quieter than expected. Both. The team exchanged glances. Uncertainty rising again. But this time, it wasn't about her abilities. It was about her past. Because whatever she had been hiding, it wasn't just catching up to her. It was waiting for them. And this time, silence wouldn't be enough to outrun it. Not anymore. Why did her hands start trembling just as the buildings began to close in? It didn't make sense at first. Sloane never trembled. Not under fire, not under pressure, not even when pain carved its way through muscle and bone. Her control was absolute. Always had been. But now something was different. Her fingers tightened slightly around the grip of her weapon, just enough for her to notice, not enough for anyone else. Not yet. The street ahead narrowed into something unnatural, too straight, too clean compared to the chaos around it. Buildings leaned inward, like silent witnesses pressing closer. Watching. Waiting. Sloane slowed her breathing. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Control it. Bury it. Because she knew this feeling. Not fear. Recognition. And recognition was far more dangerous. Behind her, the team moved carefully. No one spoke. Even Garrett, usually the one to break tension, was quiet now. They felt it too. They just didn't understand it. Sloane did. That was the problem. Her eyes scanned the rooftops again, but her focus wasn't on movement anymore. It was on structure. On intent. This wasn't just a funnel. This was a corridor. And corridors led somewhere specific. Somewhere designed. Her pulse shifted again as the radio crackled faintly at her side. Distance closing, maintain pace. That voice. Clearer now. Closer. Sloane's jaw clenched. Because she knew exactly who it belonged to. And more importantly, she knew what he was capable of. She stopped walking. This time it wasn't subtle. The team halted instantly behind her. Briggs stepped forward. Talk to me. Sloane didn't turn. Her eyes stayed fixed ahead. We're almost there. Garrett frowned. There where? She exhaled slowly. And for the first time since the mission began, her voice carried something heavier than control. Memory. A containment zone, she said. The words felt wrong in the open air. Too precise. Too clinical. Briggs studied the street ahead. What kind of containment? Sloane hesitated. Because answering that meant crossing a line she had avoided for years. But they were already inside it. They're not trying to eliminate us, she said. They're isolating us. Why? No immediate answer. Because the truth wasn't simple. It never was. Instead, she stepped forward again. Slow. Deliberate. If I'm right, she murmured almost to herself, we're about to find out. The corridor opened suddenly. Not gradually. Not naturally. One moment, they were pressed between crumbling structures. The next, space. A wide clearing surrounded by broken buildings, forming a near-perfect square. Too perfect. Too symmetrical. Sloane stopped at the edge. Her breath caught. Not from exhaustion. Not from pain. From certainty. Because she had seen this before. Not this exact place. But this design. This method. This intent. Her hands tightened again. The trembling almost returning. Briggs stepped beside her, scanning the perimeter. What is this? Sloane didn't answer. Because her attention was locked on the far side of the clearing. A single figure stood there. Motionless. Waiting. The distance was too great to see details. But she didn't need them. She already knew. Her chest rose slowly. Then fell. And everything inside her, the years of silence, the buried memories, the carefully built distance. It all shifted. Garrett's voice broke the stillness. Is that? Yes, Sloane said quietly. No hesitation this time. No deflection. Just truth. That's him. Briggs didn't take his eyes off the figure, the voice. Sloane nodded. A long pause followed. Then, explain. The word wasn't harsh, but it carried weight. Authority. An expectation. Sloane closed her eyes for a brief second. because there was no more time to hide. "They're not just tracking us," she said slowly. "They're testing us." Garrett frowned. Testing for what? Sloane opened her eyes, locked onto the figure again. "For me." The words hit harder than any gunshot. Silence stretched. Heavy, uncomfortable, unavoidable. Briggs finally turned to her. "Start talking." Sloane swallowed, her throat dry now. Not from fear, from truth. "I wasn't just a translator," she said. No surprise there. They already knew that much. "But this was different. I was part of a program," she continued. "Off books, specialized training, intelligence, field medicine, tactical response." Garrett let out a quiet breath. "That explains a lot." Sloane shook her head slightly. "No," she said, "it doesn't." Because the real part hadn't come yet. The part she never talked about. The part she had tried to erase. "They didn't just train us," she said. "They studied us, pushed limits, designed scenarios to see how far we could go before breaking." Briggs' expression darkened slightly. "And you?" Sloane's gaze dropped for the first time. To her hands. The same hands that never shook. "Except now." "I didn't break," she said softly. A pause. "Then I adapted." The word felt heavier than it sounded. Because adaptation came with a cost. And she had paid it. In ways no one else in that room could understand. Garrett spoke carefully. "And that man out there." Sloane looked up again. Her eyes sharper now. Colder. "He was one of the instructors." Another pause. Then she added, "The one who never failed a test." Briggs turned back toward the clearing. The figure hadn't moved. Not even an inch. Like he didn't need to. Like the entire situation was already under control. "Why you?" Briggs asked. "Why bring us here for you?" Sloane exhaled slowly. "Because this was the part that made everything worse." "Because I left," she said. Simple, but not complete. "They don't like loose ends," she added. Garrett shifted. "So this is what, retrieval?" Sloane shook her head. "No," she said quietly. Her eyes locked onto the man again. And this time there was no doubt. "No, this is evaluation." The word hung in the air like a storm about to break. Because evaluation meant one thing. Pass or fail. And Sloane already knew something the others didn't. He wasn't here to capture her. He was here to see if she was still worth something. Or if she had become a liability. The radio crackled again. But this time, it wasn't distant. It wasn't broken. It was clear, direct, and meant for her. "Step forward, Sloane." Her name. Not a guess. Not a confirmation. A command. The team stiffened instantly. Weapons raised. Tension snapping into place. But Sloane didn't move. Not yet. Because inside her, something was breaking through. Not fear. Not hesitation. Something older. Something she had buried for years. A version of herself that didn't hesitate. That didn't doubt. That didn't feel. Her hands stopped trembling. Completely. Garrett noticed first. Then Briggs. Because the change wasn't subtle. It was absolute. Like a switch had flipped. Sloane stepped forward. One step. Then another. Crossing into the clearing. Alone. The team didn't stop her. Because somehow they understood. This wasn't their fight. Not really. This was something personal. Something unfinished. As she walked, the distance closed. The figure became clearer, taller than she remembered, older, but not weaker, never weaker. He took one step forward to meet her, and even from a distance, she could see it. That same calm expression, that same calculating gaze, like he was already measuring her, weighing her, deciding. She stopped 10 meters away. Silence wrapped around them, the kind that pressed against your chest, demanding something. Finally, he spoke. You survived longer than expected. No warmth, no surprise, just observation. Sloane didn't react, didn't flinch, because she had learned that long ago. You taught me well, she replied. A faint pause. Then, did I? The question wasn't rhetorical. It was a challenge. Sloane's eyes didn't move. Enough to know what this is, she said. His head tilted slightly. And what is that? A breath. Slow. Controlled. Then, a test I already passed. Silence again. But this time, it felt different. Sharper. More dangerous. Because something had shifted. Not just in her. In him. And in that moment, the rest of the team realized something they hadn't before. Sloane wasn't just part of this situation. She was the reason it existed. And whatever was about to happen next wouldn't be about survival. It would be about judgment. And the worst part, the test had only just begun. What kind of test begins after you've already survived everything? The question lingered in the air like dust that refused to settle. Sloane didn't move. Neither did he. 10 meters apart, and yet it felt closer, too close, like the years between them had collapsed into nothing. Behind her, she could feel the team, tense, ready, uncertain. Waiting. But this moment didn't belong to them. It never had. You say you've passed, he said calmly, his voice steady, almost indifferent, and yet you ran. Sloane's expression didn't change. I left, she corrected. A subtle difference. But to her, it meant everything. He took another slow step forward. Measured. Deliberate. People who leave, he replied, usually don't survive long enough to justify it. A pause. His eyes scanned her, quick, clinical. Taking in the wound on her shoulder, the way she stood, the way she breathed. Still analyzing. Always analyzing. And yet, he continued softly, here you are. Sloane exhaled through her nose. Controlled. You didn't bring me here to talk about survival, she said, so say it. For a brief second, something shifted in his gaze. Approval. Not warmth. Never that. But recognition. You were always efficient, he said. Then, with no warning, he raised his hand. The world changed instantly. Gunfire erupted from the surrounding buildings. Not random. Not chaotic. Precise. Targeted. The team behind Sloane reacted immediately, diving for cover, returning fire, voices cutting through the sudden violence. But Sloane, she didn't turn, didn't flinch, didn't move. Her eyes stayed locked on him. Because she understood. This wasn't an attack. This was the test. You want to see if I hesitate, she said quietly. Another flicker in his expression. You always were quick. Sloane's mind moved faster than the bullets around her. Angles. Timing. Intent. Her team was being engaged, but not overwhelmed. Pinned. Contained. Controlled pressure. Just enough to force a decision. Her decision. She turned her head slightly. Not fully, just enough to see. Garrett behind a collapsed wall. Briggs coordinating movement. The medic dragging someone out of the line of fire. They were holding. For now, but not for long. They're not your targets, Sloane said. They're variables, he replied. Her jaw tightened. There it was. The word she hated most. Variables. People reduced to pieces on a board. She had lived in that world once. Breathed it. Believed it. Until she didn't. You taught me to assess risk, she said. And they're not expendable. A pause. A longer one this time. Because that answer wasn't what he expected. Or maybe it was. You've changed, he observed. Sloane didn't deny it. I adapted, she said. The same word. But now it carried something different. Choice. Not just survival. He studied her again. More carefully this time. Like he was looking for something deeper. Something beyond skill. Then prove it, he said. Another signal. The gunfire intensified. Closer now. More aggressive. Garrett's voice cut through the noise. We can't hold this. Sloane's heart didn't race. But something inside her shifted. Because this was the moment. The line. The one she had crossed once before and paid for. Her eyes flicked back to the man in front of her. You want to know if I'm still your weapon, she said. He didn't respond. He didn't need to. The answer was already in the design of this entire situation. Sloane inhaled slowly. Then, she turned her back on him. Completely. And ran toward her team. It wasn't hesitation. It wasn't fear. It was a decision. The kind he never allowed. The kind he had trained her out of. Or tried to. She slid into cover beside Garrett, grabbing his vest and pulling him tighter against the wall. Listen to me, she said sharply. They're not trying to kill us, they're forcing movement. Garrett blinked, adrenaline high. Movement where? Sloane pointed, 2 buildings over. A narrow break in the structure. Barely visible. Our exit. Briggs shouted from across the debris. That's exposed. Exactly, Sloane fired back. That's why it's real. A beat. Then Briggs nodded once. Decision made. Move on her mark. Gunfire cracked overhead. Debris scattered. Time collapsed into seconds. Sloane counted under her breath. 1, 2, 3. Now. They moved. Vast. Not perfectly. Not clean. But together. Sloane stayed at the back this time. Covering. Watching. Not for enemies. For patterns. Because she knew he was still watching. Still measuring. Still deciding. A shadow shifted on the rooftop. She fired once. The shape dropped. Not confirmed. But delayed. That was enough. They reached the narrow passage. One by one. Garrett. The medic. 2 more. Briggs last. He turned briefly, looking back toward the clearing. Toward the man still standing there. Watching everything. Then he disappeared into the passage. Sloane followed. The gunfire faded behind them. Not because it ended. Because it wasn't meant to continue. The moment passed. The test paused. Inside the narrow corridor, the team slowed. Breathing hard. Checking wounds. Counting numbers. Everyone was still alive. Barely. Garrett leaned against the wall, shaking his head. That wasn't luck. No, Sloane said quietly. It was. Briggs stepped closer to her. closer than before. You had a choice back there, he said. Sloane met his gaze. Yes. You walked away from him. Another pause. Then, I chose them. Simple, clear, final. Briggs studied her for a long moment, then nodded, not questioning, not doubting, just accepting. Behind them, the city remained silent, but not empty, never empty, because somewhere out there, he was still watching, and Sloane knew it. This wasn't over, not even close, because tests like this didn't end with one decision. They evolved, adapted, pushed further, and she had just changed the rules. For the first time, she hadn't followed the path he designed. She had broken it, and that made her something dangerous. Not a weapon, not a subject, something unpredictable. She leaned her head back against the cold wall for a brief second, closing her eyes, not to rest, but to think, because the next move wouldn't be his. It would be hers, and for the first time in years. That scared her more than anything else. Not because she didn't know what to do, but because she did. And it meant facing something she had avoided for too long. Not him, not the program, herself. Her eyes opened again. Sharp, focused, different, because silence had protected her once. But now, it was time to decide what she would do with the truth it had been hiding. And somewhere in the distance, the radio clicked one last time. Soft, almost amused. Interesting choice, Sloane. She didn't respond. She didn't need to. Because some answers aren't spoken. They're shown. And this time, she was ready to show him exactly who she had become. What happens when the person who trained you realizes you're no longer under their control? The corridor didn't feel like an escape. It felt like a pause. Sloane could feel it in the way the air settled too quickly, in the way the silence returned too neatly, like it had been placed there on purpose. Not earned. Given. She walked at the back again, her steps slower now, not from exhaustion but from thought. Every movement the team made echoed inside her mind, replaying the clearing, the gunfire, his voice. Interesting choice. It wasn't approval. It wasn't anger. It was curiosity. And that was worse. Because curiosity meant the test wasn't over. It meant he was adjusting. Learning. Adapting just like he had taught her to. Garrett broke the silence first. He let us go. Sloane didn't answer. Because that wasn't true. Briggs glanced over his shoulder. No, he said quietly, he didn't. A beat. Then Sloane spoke. He changed the parameters. The words landed heavier than they sounded. Garrett frowned. That's supposed to make me feel better. It shouldn't, Sloane replied. They kept moving. The corridor twisted slightly, forcing them into single file. The walls were closer now, almost pressing in. Broken concrete scraped against their gear as they passed. Controlled space. Limited options. Her mind mapped it instantly. Another funnel. But different. This one wasn't about guiding. It was about compressing. Squeezing. Forcing pressure inward. Sloane's breathing slowed again. Because she knew what came after compression. Exposure. Stop, she said suddenly. The team froze. No hesitation this time. Briggs looked at her. What is it? Sloane tilted her head slightly, listening. Not for footsteps. Not for voices. For absence. No overwatch, she murmured. Garrett blinked. Isn't that a good thing? Sloane shook her head slowly. No, she said. It means we're exactly where they want us. The realization settled like cold weight. Because if they weren't being watched, it meant they were being prepared for. A faint metallic click echoed ahead. Soft, almost polite. Sloane's eyes sharpened. Back, she said immediately. Too late. The corridor behind them sealed with a heavy crash, debris collapsing in a controlled drop. Not natural. Triggered. Garrett spun around. We're boxed in. No, Sloane said. Her voice calm. Too calm. We're contained. The word hung there again. More real this time. More final. The lights flickered above, bare wires sparking weak illumination across the narrow space. Then, movement. Panels in the walls shifted open. Not explosives. Not gunfire. Something else. Small canisters dropped, rolling across the ground with quiet precision. The hiss came a second later. Gas. Colorless. Fast-spreading. Garrett pulled his sleeve over his face. What is that? Not lethal, Sloane said quickly, her mind already racing ahead. If it was, they wouldn't need the test. The medic coughed lightly. Then what? Cognitive disruptor, she finished. And then it hit. Not the lungs. The mind. Subtle at first. A distortion at the edges of thought. Timing slipping. Focus blurring. Garrett staggered slightly. I don't feel right. Sloane grabbed his arm, steadying him. I know, she said quietly. Because she did. Too well. Her eyes closed for half a second. And suddenly, she wasn't in the corridor anymore. She was somewhere else. Years ago. Cold room. Bright lights. A voice behind glass. Let's see how long you hold under pressure. Her breath caught. Just for a second. But that was enough. The past wasn't just memory. It was sensation. Her fingers tightened involuntarily. Her pulse tried to spike. But she forced it down. Forced control. Because that was the real test. Not survival. Not combat. Control under distortion. Emotion under pressure. Choice under manipulation. Her eyes snapped open again. Sharp. Focused. Present. They're watching how we break, she said. Briggs leaned against the wall, steady but strained. Then we don't break. Sloane looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, there was something like respect in her expression. No, she said quietly. We don't. Garrett shook his head, trying to clear it. Easy for you to say. Sloane didn't respond. Because it wasn't easy. It never had been. She stepped forward, moving deeper into the gas. Not away from it. Into it. The team stared at her. Confused. Stay close, she said, and don't fight it. Garrett blinked. Don't fight it. It amplifies resistance, Sloane replied. The more you panic, the worse it gets. The medic coughed again. So what do we do? Sloane exhaled slowly. Focus on something real. A pause. Then she added. Not fear. She reached out, grabbing a piece of broken concrete from the ground and pressing it into Garrett's hand. Feel that, she said. Weight, texture, temperature, stay with it. Garrett frowned but nodded. Because even through the haze, her voice cut through. Grounded. Certain. One by one, the others followed. Small anchors. Reality over illusion. And slowly, the chaos in their minds steadied. Not gone, but controlled. Briggs looked at her again. Different now. You've been through this. Not a question. Sloane met his gaze. Yes. A beat. Then. And you came back. She didn't answer immediately. Because the truth wasn't simple. I survived, she said. Another deflection. But softer this time. Because survival didn't always mean return. The gas began to thin. Slowly. Deliberately. Like someone turning down a dial. Testing complete. For now, the corridor light stabilized. The walls remained closed. But the pressure shifted again. Changing. Evolving. Sloane straightened slightly. Her shoulder wound throbbed harder now. Ignored. Always ignored. Because something else mattered more. They're escalating, she said. Garrett wiped his face, breathing easier. What does that mean? Sloane looked ahead. At the end of the corridor. Where darkness waited. It means the next phase isn't about control, she said. A pause. Then, it's about choice. Briggs frowned. Choice between what? Sloane didn't answer right away. Because she already knew. And she didn't like it. Not one bit. Between what I was, she said slowly. Her voice quieter now. More personal. And what I've become. The words settled heavily. Because this was no longer just a mission. Not even close. This was something deeper. Something built around her. Every step. Every decision. Every reaction. All leading here. And somewhere beyond the walls. He was still watching. Still measuring. Still waiting for the moment she slipped. The moment she chose wrong. Sloane closed her eyes briefly. Not to escape. To prepare. Because the next move wouldn't test her skills. It would test her identity. And that was far more dangerous. Her eyes opened again. Clear. Steady. Resolved. Stay behind me, she said. The team didn't question it. Didn't hesitate. Because whatever this was now, they understood one thing. Sloane wasn't just part of the mission anymore. She was the mission. And as she stepped forward into the darkness ahead, one quiet truth settled into place. Some battles aren't about defeating the enemy. They're about deciding who you are when the enemy already knows you better than anyone else. And this time, there would be no more silence to hide behind. If the final choice was already decided, why did it still feel like everything could be lost? The darkness ahead wasn't empty. It waited. Not like an ambush. Not like a threat. But like a question. Sloane stepped forward anyway. Each step slower than the last, not from fear, but from understanding. Because for the first time since this mission began, there were no patterns left to read. No angles. No predictable outcomes. Just her. And what she would choose. Behind her, the team followed at a distance. Not because they were told to, but because something in them understood this wasn't something they could lead anymore. This was hers. The corridor widened again, gradually this time, opening into a final chamber. It wasn't ruined like the rest of the city. It was intact. Deliberate. Clean. Like it had been preserved for a purpose. At the center stood a single table. 2 chairs. And him. Waiting. Exactly where she knew he would be. Sloane stopped a few steps inside. The others halted behind her. No one spoke. Because words didn't belong here. You made it, he said calmly. Not surprised. Never surprised. Sloane's eyes scanned the room, walls, corners, ceiling. No visible threats. No obvious weapons. which meant the real danger wasn't physical. Of course it was. It ends here, she said. He tilted his head slightly. Everything ends somewhere. A pause. Then, but not everything finishes. Sloane stepped closer. Her boots echoed softly against the concrete floor. Then finish it, she said. Direct. No hesitation. No more deflection. He studied her. Longer than before. Not just analyzing her posture or breathing. Looking deeper. Searching. For years, he said slowly, you were the most promising subject we ever had. Sloane didn't react. She had heard versions of that before. They meant nothing now. You adapted faster than anyone, he continued. You learned to suppress fear, override instinct, eliminate hesitation. A faint pause. Perfect control. Sloane's jaw tightened slightly, because she knew what came next. You were exactly what we needed. There it was. Needed. Not valued. Not respected. Used. She took another step forward. And that's why I left, she said. The words landed clean. Sharp. Final. He didn't argue. Didn't deny it. Instead, he walked slowly around the table, closing the distance just enough to feel personal. Do you know what happens to something that walks away from its purpose? He asked. Sloane met his eyes. Yes. A beat. It becomes something else. Silence stretched. Tight. Unforgiving. And what are you now? He asked. The question wasn't part of the test. It was the test. Everything before this. Just preparation. Sloane felt it in her chest. Not pressure. Not fear. Truth. Her eyes flicked briefly to her team behind her. Garrett still catching his breath but standing. The medic watching carefully, ready. Briggs steady, grounded, trusting her without needing to say it. They weren't variables. They weren't expendable. They were human. And so was she. I'm not yours, she said quietly. Not loud. Not dramatic. But absolute. The room seemed to shift. Not physically. Something deeper. Like a line had just been drawn. He watched her closely. Then, for the first time, he smiled. Faint. Controlled. But real. Good, he said. The word hit harder than anything else he'd said. Because it wasn't disappointment. It wasn't anger. It was confirmation. Sloane's brow tightened slightly. What? He stepped back, creating space again. Control without choice is obedience, he said. We already had that. A pause. But choice under pressure, he added, that's something else. Understanding flickered in Sloane's eyes. Slow. Unwanted. This wasn't about bringing me back, she said. No. This wasn't about eliminating me. No. Another step of realization. Then, this was about seeing if I changed. He nodded once. Exactly. The truth settled heavily. Not relief. Not anger. Something more complicated. Because every step, every threat, every moment of pressure had been designed not to break her, but to reveal her. Garrett's voice came cautiously from behind. So what now? The man didn't look at him. His attention stayed on Sloane. That depends on her, he said. Of course it did. It always did. Sloane exhaled slowly. Because now, there was no script. No training to fall back on. No expectation to meet. Just a decision. Her decision. She looked at him. The man who had shaped her, broken her, built her, then tried to measure what remained. "I'm done being tested," she said. Calm, firm, real. A long silence followed. Then he nodded, not slowly, not reluctantly, just once. "Then this ends. No tricks, no hidden meaning. Just over." The tension in the room eased slightly. Not completely, but enough, because something had shifted. Something final. He turned away from her, walking toward the far side of the chamber. "You'll find your way out is clear," he said without looking back. Garrett frowned just like that. No answer, because there didn't need to be one. Sloane watched him go. Part of her expected something more. Another twist. Another test. But it didn't come. Because this wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about accepting it. Briggs stepped beside her. "You all right?" Sloane didn't answer immediately, her eyes still fixed on the empty space where he had stood. Then, "Yes," she said softly. And for once, it was true. They moved out together. Not rushed. Not chased. Just moving. Like the weight of the mission had finally lifted. As they stepped back into the open air, the city felt different. Still broken. Still scarred. But quieter. Less watchful. Garrett let out a breath he'd been holding too long. "I don't think I'll ever understand any of that." Sloane glanced at him. "You're not supposed to." He gave a tired half-smile. "Good, I was worried." A faint hint of something almost like a smile touched Sloane's face. Almost. They kept walking. The distance between them and the chamber growing with every step. But the distance inside her, that was something else. Because for years she had lived in silence. Not just outwardly. Inside. Burying everything she had been. Everything she had done. Everything she had survived. But now, that silence didn't feel the same. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was stillness. A choice. A space where she could finally decide who she was without someone else defining it. Briggs looked at her again as they reached the edge of the city. "You going to tell us the rest someday?" he asked. Sloane thought about it. Really thought. Then shook her head slightly. "Maybe not all of it." "Fair enough." Garrett shrugged. "As long as you stick around." Sloane didn't answer right away. Because staying had always been the hardest part. Leaving was easy. Disappearing was easy. But staying meant being seen. Trusted. Human. She looked at them. At the people who had chosen to follow her without fully understanding why. Who had trusted her when she finally stopped hiding. And for the first time, that didn't feel like a weakness. It felt like something else. Something stronger. "I'll stay," she said. Simple, but real. They walked on. Out of the broken city. Out of the test. Out of the past that had finally caught up to her and let her go. And as the silence settled again, it no longer felt like something to hide behind. It felt like something she carried with her. Quiet, steady, unshaken. Because sometimes strength isn't loud. It doesn't need to prove itself. It doesn't demand recognition. Sometimes, it just chooses and walks forward. And in the end, Sloane understood something she hadn't before. Control wasn't about shutting everything down. It wasn't about becoming untouchable. It was about knowing when to feel, when to act, and when to walk away. because sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply acts.